First of all, let me welcome you to Eagle Harbor Bookstore. It's our pleasure and honor to participate in events such as this, and I feel like I should burst into song now, which happens occasionally. So we're pleased and we're excited to participate in this event, and this is quite an event tonight. Before we get started, we always have a couple of commercials, however, so let me read those through real quick. So, during the month of November, Eagle Harbor Book Company is partnering with the Kitsap Immigration Assistance Center, Kayak, and sponsoring a Spanish language book drive for the benefit of Spanish language immigrant children in our community. During this month, if you will purchase a new Spanish language book from a selection that we have, those books will be gifted to the children the first week of December. A recent author that we had speaking with us last month, Julie Chen, an immigrant from China who detailed a really difficult time of transitioning to the United States, stated that it was the gift of a book, or the access of a book, that allowed her to begin learning English and break out of the terrible predicament that her family found herself in moving to the United States. It was a really compelling story, and it demonstrates just how important a book is in a child's life. You give them that book and they can change the world and change their lives. So we encourage that you participate in that. Small Business Saturday is coming up, folks. Every year we have that. That's the first Saturday after Thanksgiving. That's November 26th. It is going to be a raucous time here. We'll have music and treats and promotions and all sorts of colorful characters, such as myself, running around and helping you out. It's always jam-packed that Saturday. It's a great time, and it's a time to shop small, shop local, and build the community that we have here, one small business at a time. So we look forward to that. If you haven't purchased the book that's being discussed with this program stamp, we do have discounted copies for sale here. We have, we're discussing the young adult version, but we have the adult version, we have the children's version, we have the Spanish language version. So whatever you need, we'll get it to you. And finally, I would like to, I see you. This is Sergio, our new mascot. I'd like to give a shout out to our bookseller extraordinaire, Lily. She has been... She is quite the character here at the store. But she has spearheaded our participation, the bookstore's participation in this program, and has coordinated the program working with the other members here tonight. If you have any questions about access to the book or needing extra copies or anything about our side of the participation, please seek her out. She's happy to help, and she's a wonderful resource. She's also wonderful. There she is waving. She's also a great resource in children's, young adult, and books on book talk? I don't know. What is that? Did I get it?
Yeah, you got it.
Book talk. It's something new, people. I'm old. So she's a wonderful resource on any type of book that you need, and I hope you use it. And now for the main event, we have an extra panel member who will be more than happy to express love and inclusion and
Equity.
without question. He's certainly good at that. BI Reads has partnered with the City of Bainbridge Island and the Bainbridge Island School District and the Multicultural Advisory Council, as well as our bookstore, for a first-time event of sponsoring a book that the community can read together and then get together several times over the ensuing months and discussed the book. And BI Reads is not messing around. They have chosen for their first book out of the gate a really weighty topic, and that's race. Unfortunately, it is still unbelievably an issue in our society, but because it is, we need to explore it, address it, and ensure that we are doing everything we can in our community to strengthen our foundation of inclusion and equality. And we're always talking about groups of people, them, they, liberals, socialists, Democrats, Republicans. But these monolithic groups are really made up of individuals, us. And it is our adherence to these principles. It's our own integrity that builds the community, one by one, linking together, builds the foundation of equality. If we don't do our part, we can't expect anybody else to do theirs. And so tonight we're going to start that discussion, and so I'll turn it over to Chasity, Malatesta, got it right, and Brandi, Bispham. Bispham. Okay, well.
I always teach my students first thing how to say my last name. And people say it wrong all the time. They say it wrong to my husband. They say it wrong to my son. But you say Bispham, like fee fi fo fum Bispham.
Bispham.
There we go.
There we go. That's
Get that out of the way.
That's our first instruction tonight, folks. Both are school teachers here in the community, and both are members of the community equity. Chasity is a community equity advocate. Both are members of the multicultural, no?
Yes, Multicultural Advisory Council.
And you're the co-chair of that.
One of the co-chairs.
One of the co-chairs. So they'll be co-hosting this event tonight, and they'll be explaining what happens from this point forward. So I turn it over to them.
Welcome, Chasity, Malatesta, and Brandi Bispham, and I'm going to introduce Laura and Jana, who are actually really the powerhouses behind some of our community organizing, and the reason why BI Reads came to be. The Bainbridge Island School District that championed as part of this curriculum, Kristen Hazlip and Brandi Bispham, people who have researched and have this curriculum, know that there are many, many students, I don't know how many students who have actually read the book by this point, but wanted an opportunity for the community to see what the district was doing and the kind of information. And people really listened and really appreciated the research that they went into, and all of that to allow the community to come in and be called into the discussion rather than be called out. So we are grateful. Welcome, Laura and Jana.
Hello, welcome to the first ever BI Reads for Justice event. It's very exciting to be here, and it's our first ever community reads program. Well, actually, I don't know that. I'm new to the island, and so maybe there has been another reads program on the island. But this is specifically a 6-month program about BI Reads for Justice. And the reason we chose the book Stamped, which is available in the back, is because it is read by the 8th graders at Woodward Middle School. And there were conversations among various community members saying, hey, if these kids get to learn this history, why don't the adults get to learn this history? And it's a history book about the history of racism and the fight against racism in the US. So good history for all of us to learn. And the program will run through March. So you should be looking for events every month. If you're in a book club, you should have your book club read it. We will also offer other sorts of discussion opportunities if you'd like to discuss the book. So, my name's Jana Kors-Essery, and we're city volunteers. This is Laura Van Dyke, and she'll say something next.
I will say something next. I'd like to introduce Elise Francisco. So first thing I'd like to do is thank everyone for coming. This is such an outpouring. I think everyone should just kind of turn your head and just see how many people we have.
Wow.
Hi. Hi, This is so heartening to see this kind of a turnout for our first event. So thank you so much. I'd like to just throw out some special thanks. First of all, I'd like to thank our elders that are here with us. Ukuye Karen Vargas, thank you for joining us. Gina Corpus, thank you so much for joining us. To our REACT members that are here, Savannah Rollstead, thank you. Jing Fong, thank you. Olivia Hall, yay. Yeah. Peggy Erickson, yay. Randy Bispham, and Francis Jacobson is also here tonight. So there you are. Hey.
Laura, so is Clarissa.
Oh, and Clarissa's here too. Thank you. Oh, and Eric. You guys snuck it. Awesome. Thank you. So grateful that you're all here. To our city council members that are here with us today, thank you so much, Brenda Fantroy Johnson, Clarence Morwaki, thank you. I misspelled it, my mistake, sorry. And Joe Dietz, thank you so much for being here tonight. We have school district members. I have a different part for staff, but we could. Blair King, of course, is here. He is our city manager, and Elise Francisco, who is our urban fellow. Excited to have you guys here. Thank you. We have a school district member, Kristen Hazlip is here tonight. Very excited to have her here. And Mark Emerson from our school board is here also. So very, very grateful that you all are here. We were hoping to have some library staff, but they are also very busy. But I wanted to let you all know that they are supporting us in this effort, and we're really grateful for their help. And then Kimmy, I just saw that Kimmy is here also. Thank you so much. Kimmy Kinoshita is here also, one of our elders. I'd like to pass it over to Elise Francisco to talk a little bit about the city.
Hello, thank you, Laura. Yes, I am the National Urban Fellow at the City Hall, and I just want to say on behalf of the city, we're super excited to be partnering with REACT, Cassette Regional Library, and Eagle Harbor Books to help foster community through reading. And yes, and I will pass it off to our educators to start the land acknowledgement.
Every part of this soil is sacred in the estimation of my people. Every hillside, every valley, every plain and grove has been hallowed by some sad or happy event in the days long vanished. We would like to begin by acknowledging that the land on which we gather is within the ancestral territory of the Sequab people of clear salt water, also known as the Sequamish people. Expert fishermen, canoe builders, and basket weavers, the Sequab live in harmony with the lands and waterways along Washington's central Salish Sea, as they have for thousands of years. Here the Sequab live and protect the land and waters of their ancestors for future generations, as promised by the Point Elliott Treaty of 1855.
Thank you, Gigi. Thank you, Dr. Dana from Islandwood, who gave us an offering for a poem just to set the space. An invitation to brave space. Together we will create brave space, because there's no such thing as a safe place. We exist in a real world. We all carry scars, and we all have caused wounds. In this space, we seek to turn down the volume of the outside world, especially the election. We amplify voices that fight to be heard elsewhere. We call each other to more truth, to more love. We have the right to start somewhere and continue to grow. We have the responsibility to examine what we think we know. We will not be perfect. It will not always be what we wish it to be. But it will be our brave space together, and we will work on it side by side. Nikki Scotty Jones. Whether you've read the book, have no education, are intermediate, or your varsity level, social justice, you are PhD level, social justice, you are elder, historian, curator, you are producer, history holder, indigenous. We all start together in fresh space. Welcome.
hear me back there? All right. No. It's not on. It's not on.
It's on.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Fantastic, thank you. Before we get started, there are some Post-it notes that are available in the back near the refreshments. And as you think tonight, if you have a question or you'd like to leave a question or leave a comment, or maybe a wondering about an event coming up or you have an idea about that, anything that you would like to leave, if you'd write that on the Post-it note, and you can stick it back there on the sign, or also leave it in the chair that you're sitting in. So thank you very much for that. So I get the pleasure of kicking off the event with our future, with some brilliant minds and people who are going, I'm getting a little choked up, but they're gonna go far. These young minds, we have so many on Bainbridge Island, but I'd like to introduce to you Gigi, Nadia, Hannah, Logan, and Justice. And so to start us off, we're just throwing out the question to them, which is, why do you think it's important that people are able to talk about race in our society? What would you say? You can pass it along or you can talk.
I think it's really important to talk about race in our society because in order to have a well-functioning society, we need to embrace everybody as they are. And a large part of what makes up people's experiences.
Louder.
A large part of what makes up people's experiences is the race that they are. And it's important to acknowledge that people have had different life experiences and they've had to have different journeys to get to the same spot.
And adding on to Nadia, it's important that we aren't ignorant about the past and that we know what everyone's past was and we can be aware of it so we aren't ignorant heading into the future.
So for race is part of everyone, and to be able to face something like that is needed in our society if we want to function, as Nadia says, but we can't just gloss over it. Because this book has actually been a lot controversial across the country. It's been banned by a couple states, not taught in schools, but race is something we need to know. And it's in our history. And if we aren't learning what is completely in our history, then what is the point of history class? If we can't go and learn about the entire history, then why just learn about cherry-picked parts of history? That's why you need to go, and you need to learn about every single part, not every single, but the parts that are important. And you need to see both sides of the story. Not just one side, not just this part that's cherry-picked by a person who wants to see their way. You need to see both ways. And I feel like that's great. We need to be able to talk about race today and be able to see so we don't make mistakes, as Hannah said, as mistakes by not being ignorant about our past. Because history is to learn about our mistakes and not to make it in the future.
I believe it's important to talk about race because it can create a sense of belonging for people that look like me and have experiences like me, and it also creates a space for people to gather a better understanding and a sense of the world around us, and it's just good for people to understand concept of race because it makes up, as she said, makes up who we are, and it can basically give you an insight of why we think the way we think and why we do the things we do and why we fight for what we fight for. And I think it's good for people to understand our reasonings, and it can help with the fight for what we're fighting for, fight for equity, fight for equality, and fight for justice for people that look like me. So yeah, that's why.
Anyone else want to add anything to that? That's pretty great. I'm not sure. Good luck topping that.
Everybody, goodbye. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Students have spoken.
So I know that at least 3 of you have read Stamped, and perhaps Justice and Gigi. I don't know if you've read Stamped, but I am curious to throw out there, how did this book make you look at history maybe through a different lens?
I have not read the whole book. I have read the beginning of the book. But since I haven't read the whole book, I'm just going to talk about my experience with learning about history and etc. Just from the beginning of when I was a child to now, your parents, you always think you know everything. You know what I mean? When a kid, they like to talk back to their parents and be like, oh no, I know it already. And then as you grow up, you're like, oh, I really didn't know. And that's how I feel about race and everything. When I go to school here, sometimes everybody has like prejudice. Everybody has prejudice against somebody. And when I learn history, that prejudice kind of goes away. It makes me understand other people better. It makes me understand why we have the reactions and why we react the same. It helps me understand myself better as a human being and why I feel this a way to fight for myself and fight for others. And history basically helps me, give me a reason to want to better my future and everybody else's future. So I think history can add a little bit of everything to everybody's life.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
You can snap when you hear something good. Steal a little snap. Try that. Everybody can do it.
When I learned about history, one of the people I was taught, Abraham Lincoln, he was kind of painted as a hero, the guy who ended slavery. But reading Stamped gave me a complete new perspective over history. It's like one example of that is Abraham Lincoln. He was a hero, but wasn't entirely. He was a politician. He would say some things, and he'd mean the other. He'd say he'd do this thing, he didn't entirely do it. But even ending slavery, the Emancipation Proclamation, it wasn't completely towards he wanted to end slavery. It was a political move. It was a correct one, in fact, but it was not completely motivated for the correct reasons. But just the book itself taught me so much about this history, taught me both sides, showed me what I was ignorant about, what I thought I knew, but I didn't, as Justice said. Honestly, it just gave me a new light on what I already learned, and other things as well.
So kind of adding on to what both of them said, you learn things in history class, and you think you know everything about it, but when you read this book, you realize you don't, and there's just so much that goes on in between the lines that you never realize, and yeah, you just don't really know until you really focus on it and you really just look at a historical event and say, hey, this was good, or hey, this person was good, but what were they doing, and why, and what was their motivation, and what was going on in that period of time. And yeah, I'm just gonna
reading Stamped and talking more about race was really kind of eye-opening for me, because up until 8th grade I had been taught one side of history, and that was the side we white people did everything well, they founded our nation, all that. And reading Stamped really helped me realize that it was our nation was built on the back of slave labor, and that even the presidents who say that they did the really good things and our founding fathers, they owned slaves, and it just showed a side of history that I had not learned before, and I think that's just really important, and it helps us prevent making the same mistakes that we've made in the past.
Can I ask Nadia, do you think that a lot of us adults, old people, may not have learned that?
Yeah, too? I feel like a lot of people don't really realize what really happened. They realize the version that we were told in school and the version that we were told in the textbooks, and it left out a bunch of details. And so I feel like it's really important that everybody understands these details and admits that they exist.
Yeah.
You don't have to sing. I would love to. Okay.
I think Gigi should talk.
Sit back. Get comfortable.
Hi everyone, I'm Gigi. I'm from the Bainbridge Island Youth Partners in Health Engaged chapter, as well as Max and Connor over there. Can I get a wave over there? Thank you, boys. So we're part of a group that tries to expand healthcare outcomes across the world. We're a chapter of the organization, Partners in Health. So we talk about health a lot, specifically all the things that determine people's health outcomes. And race is like an enormous one, not just because of specific prejudice or stereotype in a labor room when a black woman is giving birth, but also the legacies of colonialism, the impacts of capitalism, talking about the IMF, just how poor countries that are majority black are treated. I think talking about race is so important so we can treat our community members as best as possible, but also so we can understand why some people have really good access to health and why some people don't. And so as someone who believes health is a human right, especially health care is a human right, I think we need to talk about race so we can understand how to actually expand that right to all people.
Woo! Okay, y'all, we're taking notes. That was one of Emily Eigen, if you want to know, humanities instructors at BHS, and please raise your hand. Just raise your hand. If you haven't appreciated, if you want to appreciate some people, y'all need to be sending some notes to some teachers. I don't care if you don't breed or do breed or been breeding, didn't breed. Find a teacher at BHS because the kind of things that they're talking about, the kind of discussions are building children that can talk about this at an earlier age and understand the world. Yes. Sorry, Emily.
Okay, wait, got one more thing.
Sorry.
Got one more thing?
Sorry, we're calling back a little bit ago. Yeah, with the older generations, I was like my parents.
They're not here, right? They're not here.
They're not here.
Okay, your parents.
That's your parents.
Yeah, just my parents. They weren't taught all this in their schools. They were taught a version that was just one side of it. And I feel like even if just us learning it is so new to us, it's also new to some other people. Not just this younger generation right now is being just completely new to them, but it might also be new to other people because they weren't taught this when they were young. It wasn't even a topic really about race when they were younger. That's really all I had to add.
That's great. That's great.
Also, not all young people, not all people our age are actually learning about this, as we've seen by Stamped being banned in so many states here. And it's really sad because I'm actually really proud to have been able to have the opportunity to read this book and to be educated about just how America works. And I think the people of America and the children and adults of America deserve to know their past.
I think there's the mic drop to that. And so, yeah, it's okay. So thank you all so much. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your words. Thank you for your wisdom and your willingness to share with us tonight.
And as you're normalizing stretching those muscles, like going to a gym, like going to Bethany Gym, they're stretching these equity muscles and getting stronger and stronger. So if you got a weak muscle, take some of this in, because you just got to work out, okay? And if you feel something triggered, like that little thing, that might be an inner opportunity to be asking those questions, and that's okay. Everybody say, not perfect.
Not perfect.
Say mess up.
Mess up.
Because something in our society said y'all need to be perfect, but look at our grammar. We are not. You are excused, y'all. All right, next panel. And we'll go a couple more panels and then it's it. So this is gonna go by fast, y'all. So get it all in. Okay, can we have Savannah, Blair King, Kristen Hazlett, Dr. Deanna Theo, and Peter Drury. Oh boy. And if I said it wrong, just correct me. I make mistakes, see?
So we know that your answers are going to be different, and that's part of why we're all here tonight, is to listen to each other, to learn from each other, and to maybe spark thoughts from people who are listening. So we want to encourage you for sure that if someone says something in our conversation or something bubbles up, we want you to feel free to just chime in to react to that. So let's go around, and if you would, just say a little bit about yourself and what brings you to this conversation tonight.
I'd like to not go first. Hi, I'm Kristen Hazlett. Can you hear me in the back? Okay. I'm the Executive Director of Secondary Teaching and Learning in the Bainbridge Island School District and previously worked as the principal at Bainbridge High School. So I have a direct connection to the text that we're launching here with BI Reads and to the students that were up front speaking most recently. And obviously feel a tremendous amount of pride about the way that our students in this community are able to speak real openly about race. And also want to note that we have wonderful high school students at Eagle Harbor High School as well, which wasn't referenced this evening, but want to make sure we're representing our Eagle Harbor High School kids.
And I'm Diana Scipio, and this is a topic near and dear to my heart for also many reasons. As my mom would say, sometimes I'm the only raisin in the bun when I am in spaces, academic spaces, research spaces, so I carry that responsibility, not to speak for others, but to make sure that my voice is heard. I work with the graduate students at Islandwood in our Education for Environment and Community program, and at the core of our program is justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. And we work for the whole 9 months that our students are with us, talking about these issues, bringing it up, making sure that they, as educators, have the skills that they need to be able to have these conversations. Because we feel like the more that they work on themselves and understand who they are and what they bring to their teaching, the better prepared they are to work with a diverse group of young people. And so that's the work that I get to do every week. Today we were talking about anti-bias in children's books at one of our applied learning sessions, which is basically professional development, but I'm an academic. I gotta come up with a new name for everything.
Hello, my name is Savannah Rowlstead. I was raised on this island. I went through the school district here as well. My reasons for being here, I am the co-chair of REAC, for the Race Equity Advisory Committee for the City of Bainbridge Island. I went to school in New York, upstate New York, and I came back because this is where home is. And when I got here, I said, okay, well, this looks a little better than it did 20 years ago, but still not looking so great, guys. So as somebody who has younger sibling and wanted to see a difference made for those students back there, it became really prevalent to me that something needed to change. And as I continued to work with children, I realized it needs to change here and now, and it,
It's Ghostbusters.
It is Ghostbusters. I got distracted because I was excited. It's time for a dance party. Okay. Well, that's on par with what I do with children, you know.
As you should.
My main focus, and listening to you talk about how, you know, you're teaching the grad students. My main focus was when I'm working as a preschool teacher is saying people of color need to be in positions of power. This is when children see people of color in positions of power, that's when they know that is the norm. And that is what we need to see going forward. So anyway, that's why I'm here.
My name's Blair King. I'm the city manager here in Bainbridge Island. I am a fan of One Reads. I have had the opportunity throughout the last 7 years to participate in One and Community Reads. In 2020, I was at a city that voted for Stamp from the Beginning as their Community One Read, so I had the opportunity to read that book in 2020. So now it's 2022, and I'm in another city where we're reading another version of Stamp as the Community Read. I also just coincidentally was born in Uijeongbu, South Korea. My name when I was born was Chun Larry. I am a naturalized U.S. citizen. I grew up in an Anglo household that was a mixed race household. I've had the opportunity in my adult life to work in 2 cities that were majority minority cities. I've seen a very diverse communities. I've seen predominantly Anglo communities. I love the idea of community reads, and this book is a really interesting book for me for a variety of reasons. Again, having had the opportunity to read it once in one community, I'm really looking forward to reading it again in another community and to compare and contrast the differences in those communities. And I gotta say, the demographics of the community in 2020 are very, very similar the Bainbridge Island. So I'm curious if it's going to have the same reaction and the same reception that occurred then. So that's why I'm here. I want to promote the One Read and really want to talk about Stamp and this version of Stamp 2.
Thank you. My name is Peter, he, him pronouns. I approach this conversation with great humility. I grew up on Bainbridge Island, K through 12. Blakely, I think they call them the Bulldogs now. We didn't have a mascot back then. Blakely. And I grew up on this island and then chose to come back to it in more recent years and have children who've grown up here. And so, and I feel a deep connection to this land and this place. But I will say that as a part of my journey, I feel like much, as was spoken of earlier by some of our younger students, you know, the history we learn and the history we don't learn are terribly important. And I grew up with a great sense of privilege being on Bainbridge Island, and I felt that as I left the island in particular, it's not that it wasn't true on the island, as I grew in my life, took me off the island, I kept learning more and more and more nuances and lenses to stories that I hadn't necessarily learned. And so I just am somebody who approaches this conversation with humility as a, you know, as a, I'm sorry?
I'm just connected with you.
Oh, okay, thank you. Sorry. And see my place as a, you know, as a listener and a co-collaborator in this conversation. I think it can be very sensitive for, you know, people who look like me to necessarily feel like, oh, I feel great about that conversation, you know. And I think it's important for me to model that in my life for people who look like me, people who share my demographic, to participate in these conversations. So I'm just here to be here.
Thank you, everybody. Over to you. Over to you.
Is that a white cis male talking that he needs to learn about it?
You notice all the white people. All the white people are over here.
Oh yeah. I just want to say that it's a man. I thought Bainbridge Island only had well-read women. She said the thing. I'm the one that says the thing. Joe, don't worry. I didn't say anything. I didn't even. Don't. He looked right at me. Why do you think, at least right now, when, for you in your life, when was talking about race normalized? And what I mean by normalized, let me put some parameters around that, meaning that for many of us, normalized was out the crib, and for when was it normalized in your home?
Hello. So one of the things I forgot to mention is I'm not a natural born citizen of the United States. I was adopted from Lima, Peru as a 3-week-old baby, and I was raised by a Dane and an American. So I lived on this island, and I call myself a potato, brown on the outside, white on the inside, because I walk around this island with privilege because I was raised here. But when you come back and you see all these things, you know, I have, from the beginning, I was always told I was adopted. I was always told, you're from somewhere else. This is a conversation that was very, very prevalent in my home growing up. So this was, you're Peruvian. How do we connect you with that kind of culture? Okay, we got to go to Seattle. We're not going to find it here. So we got to go to Seattle, and you got to be able to, you know, be part of the conversation.
Did you run after brown people in Seattle?
Well, so that's when I went to Running Start. I went to Running Start in 11th and 12th grade, and I'd been raised here. I walk into Seattle Central Community College, and I walk in. It was like, I was like, so, okay, everybody looks like me. And it was like, instead of walking in a crowd and feeling like you were the raisin in the bun, I was like, everybody's the chocolate right now. I was walking down the hall, and I was like, everybody is not white. And it was like, holy crap. And then I went to school in Syracuse, New York, and that was a whole eye-opening experience, because New York is the state, so. But that is, you know, having it be part of a conversation so early in life is, I think, one of the reasons it became so prevalent in my adult life. And I think that is something that really is really important as parents raising children to start the conversation super early.
Hi, my mom was an educator as well, and so from an early age was, speaking about race in our home in a way, but speaking about race publicly was not something that I really engaged in until college, to be honest. I grew up in Bellevue, which at the time was not as diverse as it is now, and then went to college in the Bay Area in California, and so that was the first time where really we talked about race in classes, we talked about race in our community, on campus in different aspects. And so that is something that, as an educator, I feel like it is our job to prepare our kids to enter a world with much more diversity than they may see in the classroom, visually see, and really understand the multiple and intersecting identities of the students in our room and in our community and in the world at large before we launch them off past high school and have that be their first experience. So for me, thinking about my own experience, it really was college when we actually talked about it publicly.
Well, I told you a little story about my mom's using all sorts of euphemisms and terms, but we didn't always use euphemisms. A lot of the time we talked straight. We used the vocabulary, we learned the history. I grew up partially in San Francisco. I was born in the Bay Area. And then my parents are both from Trinidad and Tobago, and so, yeah. And then when I was about 7, we moved back there. And that's where I went to the end of elementary school and high school, and what a sea change. From San Francisco, where my parents were seeking out a really diverse community for us. Japanese, Chinese, Koreans, French, Spanish, Latino, all sorts of folks. And of course, lots of white folks as well, because this is San Francisco, and that was our community. And then we moved to Trinidad and Tobago, and that is an Afro-Caribbean and Indo-Caribbean, a very multicultural society, but largely Afro and Indo-Caribbean folks. And so that was the first place where I was like, oh, doctors, lawyers, nurses, people who got arrested, people who were houseless, all representations of community, all representations of our society, embodied in people who looked like me. And that was a revelation. In the same way that you were feeling it, that was a revelation. And it also shifted something fundamentally inside of me around what was possible and where I could go and what I could do. And when I came back to college in the Bay Area as well, and moving back there were definitely moments where people were talking about it, but I wasn't talking about it with my friends the way that we talk about it now. I wasn't listening to young folks talk about their pronouns. We weren't having the same types of conversations about what inclusivity looks like. We were not necessarily looking across the room at each other and saying, there's a danger if we only focus on a single story about who someone is. And check out Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie's TED Talk, The Danger of a Single Story. Also, all our faves are problematic, so, we'll just leave that there. I name that because I think the young folks also talked about complexity. There is no single story, there is no one answer, and people are complex, nuanced individuals, and we're not going to get there unless we actually talk about the things that make us who we are. And race is one of the things that makes us who we are. I've had folks look at me and say, I don't see color, I just see you. I know, nice. So nice. Except you didn't see me, if that's what you said. Because that's part of who I am. This is me, all of me. And I think the more that we can have these conversations, the more people are going to be able to bring their whole selves into spaces. And that's where the really amazing things can happen. It just feels like such an invitation to me.
I just want to drop the mic there and not say anything else, but I'm going to say more because you did ask us a question.
I did.
But that's beautiful. I don't know that word normalize. I don't know if I can even say in terms of like when I first felt.
Thank you for saying that. I just wanted someone to say that to me.
Okay.
You already said, I don't know if I understood or if normal.
Yeah.
You know what? People don't like to be, vulnerable to say that. And just so you know,
Yeah.
you just made somebody flex a muscle.
Oh, good. Flex muscles out there. And I will say that. So no, absolutely. Hey, I'm all about the vulnerability and the honesty. Like I got nothing to hide. But
Where have you
but
been,
having
sir?
but growing
This is new Bainbridge men.
but having grown up
Ladies.
but having grown up on Bainbridge Island, I don't know if my word for this would be normalized, but I was in kindergarten when Issa Matsudaira spoke to me about the Japanese American exclusion on this island. And so I remember in kindergarten beginning to learn about that differentiation of experience and injustice and exclusion. It was phenomenal to me. And in fact, I'm going to fast forward a bunch of years. I went to college. I remember telling people in college about Japanese American exclusion, and people didn't know what I was talking. About. And I learned about that far before I ever learned about Nazi Germany and like that came later in my education. But like literally from kindergarten, I can picture being in the Matsudaira family kitchen and Issa Matsudaira sharing that with me. And I fortunately have had the chance several times in my adult life to tell her what impact her sharing that story with me in kindergarten has had on my life. And I know lots of young people growing up on Bainbridge Island, because we talk as we do about the history of this place and people who have lived here and been excluded from here. I think it's a terribly important part of social justice education here on the island. But the second piece I'll say is I do remember, and I don't know if anybody else kind of remembers, at some moment in history there was a film that came out, and I'm sure I was in elementary school, called Roots. You remember when Roots came out on PBS?
Yes, sir.
And so, and so whatever year that was, right? I'm gonna put that 1970 something, 1, 72. Yeah. So that had a phenomenal impact, and I would say at that moment in time, that's back when there was like 3 TV channels. There was like 4, 5, and 7, and 4 and 9 on PBS. And I felt like every family, every kid, I thought we were all watching Roots. I don't know if we were all watching Roots, but at least in my family's community, we were all watching Roots. And I felt like my parents were able to talk to me about injustice and inequity, and at that time, at that age for me, I had a profound sense of guilt about all that. In my own evolution, I had to evolve from what it means to move from a place of guilt to a place of knowledge and understanding and solidarity and power and criticism. But it certainly started as a young person of oh crap, those are my people, look what they're doing to the other people. At a very young age. And so Roots had a phenomenal impact on me.
Chaz, it totally messed up. So, I am also an adopted. I'd actually like to introduce my wife, Nancy Adams. We both happen to be Korean adoptees. We came to the United States when we were toddlers. So, like that, we always knew we were a little bit different. But I came to a family that felt the need to explain. My full name or explanation was, this is our son Blair. He's adopted from Korea. We love him anyway. They felt the need to explain, and they also, I would tell you, were race deniers. We didn't talk a lot about race. I grew up outside of Yosemite National Park, predominant Anglo community. The only flavor of race type were Native kids. People would misidentify me as Native. In fact, the Native community would just misidentify me as Native. I would explain I wasn't. Sometime in high school, I just gave up. I never tried to pass, but on the other hand, I just gave up explaining. Probably so race has always been a part, but probably not in a real healthy way, to be honest with you. So I don't know, I think for a lot of people my age, a lot of boys or males, my view of race, ironically, started to change with athletics. I started interacting with people of a wide variety of racial differences, and we were a team. They became the first people that were my friends that I related to differently. And because I cared about them, I cared about their background. As life went on, I learned more about my background. I returned to Korea as an adult. Korea, by the way, is an extremely racist country. The reason that I'm here as being a mixed race person, I probably would not have had a future in Korea. The issue of my identity, my teammates, the people I knew, over time has evolved my opinions of race. I think the most difficult conversation we have in our multicultural society in the United States isn't about sex. For me, it isn't about adoption. It's about race and our racial identity. And that's why these kind of conversations, and with young people, are super important. So I will say, I grew up in a very confusing background, and my contact with race was and still is a confusing experience of mixed emotions and mixed experiences, but something that we need to talk about and come to grips with.
Can I say that mic is driving me crazy back
yeah.
there? It's in and out, and it's in and out, and it's really, so maybe one mic, not that one.
Hello?
One good mic.
Yeah, one good mic.
Okay. Thank you. One of the things that was normalized on this island that I find very different is what Peter was saying was in 5th grade, Dr. Frank Kitamoto came and spoke about the Japanese internment. And so that was a normalized piece of history as a Bainbridge Islander. That when I was a child, this was something that was so prevalent that other children were not learning about because they didn't live here. And so that was one of the first experiences I had speaking and learning about race. And having Dr. Kitamoto be the man that was telling us about it was so important. And I was like, really? This is my dentist. This is awesome. And anyways, so.
I'm just going to add, because of the plug there for Dr. Kitamoto, and we have BIJAC, the president of BIJAC sitting right here, and we have Honorable Gina Corpaz of the Independent community, and Apuye Vargas, our African-American custodial person who holds our history really throughout Kitsap region, that what they're telling you is that these advocates bring hope. Hope is a practice thing, and that Frank Kitamoto on the shoulders of them, for those people involved in the Multicultural Advisory Council, for the elders from the Suquamish, that these advocates, see, it's really funny, we're like, we don't really want to talk about race, but mention who is pushing those conversations, who is advocating for people, and they know every single leader of one of those BIPOC groups. They've been here all along. This island has a history of allyship and racism. This island has a history of white individuals who stood up and for grown-ups and stood up and did the right thing, and a history of young people who had to stand up. And by the way, that history is still going on today. This book isn't so much a history book, it's a today book. So just wanted to make that really clear. Stamped is not a historical account. It is a connected, interconnected, tap-rooting, bringing together the red lines and every other wave of oppression and connecting the dots because you didn't know. You didn't know and had access. We have people who are triggered to talk about race, and they're triggered because of shame, because we didn't normalize. Lily and I have been talking about being brown for quite some time. I'm good at being brown. Are you good at being brown? I'm pretty good. You good at being? I'm good at brown. I'm professional. But some of you woke up and you're like, I can't talk about brown. Yeah, you can. Because if you don't, then you can't mitigate what you don't see. There are people that don't want you to see. There are people that don't want you to see.
I'm gonna answer the question. Can I answer the question?
Yeah.
You need a mic. Wait for the mic. Okay, thank you. So the question is, when was normalizing talking about race? When do you remember that becoming normalizing? So I'm gonna say that growing up, I grew up in an educated home, and I could talk about race in an academic sense. When I became a teacher, I had many students of color, and that was part of processing and conversation. I fell in love with my husband. We got married.
Wait. You want to tell me what your husband looks like? Chocolate what?
No.
That's part of the story.
Well, we are a biracial family. We are a biracial couple. And that was not part of our story. We fell in love as two teachers, and then we had children. And I will say that talking about race became normalized for me when our students went to school. And when our students went to school, when our children went to school. I'm a teacher. I just deal with children all the time. There's just children everywhere. Children, your children, my children. They're just children. But I have two sons. I have 2 sons, and when they started going to school, that was when talking about race became a daily part of our home. And it was not negative, it was not positive, it was part of our daily conversation in some way. And what I realized at that point in time was that my white friends with their white families weren't doing that. And that was a real interesting aha for me. When my children got their driver's license, and we needed to have a lot of talks about what you do when you are driving your car and what's going to happen when you're pulled over and when you're pulled over, not if you're pulled over, but when you're pulled over. We had those talks, and I realized that my white friends with their kids weren't having those conversations. So for me, it was having children was when it really became normalized.
I only say this, that I had different conversations with different people, and as an educator, black students would come in my room and I'd close the door and I would tell a different story to my white students and my black students. Before a field trip, if we were getting on buses and going somewhere, I'd be like, look, Jerry, Brad, and you stay with Jerome and Shaquico. Okay, if something goes awry, you all have to double back, you look out for them. And I've been telling this story so long because I didn't know how to stop the oppression from happening when we were out there. I could do whatever I wanted to do in my classroom. I could close the door and keep them all safe in my castle. But I couldn't stop out there. When I came to Bainbridge Island community, I had the luxury and the privilege of meeting Akuye Vargas. At the time, Karen Vargas. That's after she went to Africa. Then she got her other name. So the beauty of meeting other people who could see 3D. Brandi's son gave me a quote. I don't know what. Sorry, Max, I'm put you on blast. I said, what do you want? How do you want grown-ups to show up for our biracial and our multicultural? By the way, that's eking up to 28%. Yes, I said it. How do you want us to show up for you? How do you want us to show up? And he said, I want the grown-ups on Bainbridge Island to see what I see. Just see what I see. That made a profound, because it was still going on, but sometimes we don't have champions who are willing to, because we want to be so polite and agree and make people feel good, but our children are saying to us, do you see what I see? From topics like sexual assault, to mental health, to everything else. So if you're agreeing with everybody, you're not seeing what they're seeing. They gotta have grown-ups who can see. Some of you see 3D, I know who you are. And that's a gift. Are you using your gifts to advocate? Are you supporting those BIPOC leaders? Are you supporting those young female leaders? Gigi, oh my goodness gracious. And if you aren't, there's an opportunity for you to do so. You can support our school district. Get in there, even if you didn't breed anything, get in there.
So our next question is, what's the impact of not normalizing talking about race? We talked about when you first realized that that was normalizing for yourself, but if that's not part of people's normal conversation, what do you believe is the impact? And I would invite you to also think about organizations or groups that you know, and how that isn't just impactful for individuals, because it certainly is, but also for groups of people. Is it hard? That's a hard question.
That's a little calculus-y.
Okay, well, it's all right. I got Texas.
She got Dr. D's doctorate. She's got a doctorate. She's got. I'm over here in the back row going, don't look at me. Me.
Yeah. Well. So, shame and fear and guilt are not emotions where people can learn. When you are feeling those things, you cannot learn because it triggers in your body. If you just close your eyes for a minute and remember the last time you felt guilt about something, did it make you want to fix it? Or did it make you want to, I call it ostriching. My students get this moment where they haven't turned in an assignment and they're feeling guilty. right? And so they stick their head in the sand instead of coming to talk to me during office hours about how we can fix this. And I mention this not to put my students on blast. They are amazingly busy, wonderful humans. I say this because this is part of the human condition. I'm feeling guilty, I'm feeling afraid, I'm feeling shame, and I don't want to feel that way. So instead of talking about the thing that is making me feel that way, I'm going to say that thing needs to go away. And that's, I think, the impact of not normalizing these conversations. Because Chaz said it's like a muscle. If you don't stretch your muscle, then you don't grow your muscles. But to quote some wonderful song lyrics, if you're skinny, then use your little muscles, right? You start with the little muscles, you build up the bigger muscles, you keep on going, right? If you're skinny, use your little muscles. And as you know, you go to the gym, you build those muscles up. And that's, I think, unfortunately, another impact of not talking about this. Because we get in our minds that some people are good about talking about this because it impacts them. And some people are not good about talking about this because they never had to, or they know nobody asked them to. And so we get this idea.
But I know you, and since I know a brown person, you know what? They're the expert in my life.
Fine, yeah.
And you know what? Anytime I need to talk about black stuff, I'm going to Akuye.
Right.
Kuye, you go ahead and talk. You go ahead and talk.
See?
The burden that when they leave a room or a conversation from the city or from a government or a PTO meeting, when the black person is always asked, well, what do you think black people should do, Ambassador?
Amen.
Amen.
This is another impact of not talking about it, right? Because now we don't each see the role that we play. So you give an academic a mic, I'm going to quote some people. So Paulo Freire talks about the oppressed and the oppressors, right? And he says that both groups are harmed and dehumanized because of the context that you put them in. This context is our broader society. If we're not able to talk about these things, we might just flip the script on who is the oppressed and who's the oppressor. That's not it. We have to address why we have an oppressed and an oppressor class. And that, to get there, we have to have a conversation about race. We have to have a conversation about ableism. We have to have a conversation about fat phobia. We have to have a conversation about homophobia. All of the isms and all the phobias, we have to talk about them. And that, I think, is another one of those impacts, right? We think, oh, we just sweep it under the rug, let's not worry about it. I talk about it a lot because I think that that's what makes my educators so much better at teaching science, at teaching literacy, at mathematics, at teaching, because teaching is, you're yourself when you're a teacher. You bring yourself into the space all the time. And you have to know who you're bringing into that space because the young folks in front of you are bringing themselves too. And they deserve a teacher and an educator who understands who they are and then can see the students in front of them.
And a buffet, everyone's welcome to the buffet. Some might leave hungry.
Sure.
And some will leave full at different times, but the buffet is always prepared and calling people in. Okay, you want to volunteer? Go ahead. Okay, there's always an opportunity, an entry point for building community. The Japanese internment, this story that was here because of the strong Japanese people is one of the launches. Every time we have this, it is a launch into another story. Don't get it twisted. People go, well, we don't talk about equity and allyship. Shoot, you guys coin phrases here.
So I mentioned that I grew up in a strange environment with deniers. My parents are good people. They're passed on now. But in our household, we didn't talk about race, not really, because there was no reason to. We treat people equally. We don't see people's race. We are good people. And so there was very little conversation about race because there wasn't a need from their standpoint. From my perspective, that is a very limiting world. And one of the things that happens in that limiting world is the issue of empathy for other people becomes muted, it becomes weak. And because there is a little bit of review. I know that as we deal with society and we talk about issues of race, and some people feel uncomfortable with race, I can project and think about the people that I knew that were deniers. In their mind, they are good people. But their ability to empathize or relate to other people is limited because their view is that somehow if we talk about race, it might offend someone. It will bother them. It bothers me, and I don't want to offend anybody, so I'm going to ignore any conversation about race. So I think that's one. So the issue of our ability to relate to other people and our ability to be empathetic becomes weakened if we don't talk about race.
So I know if we draw back to what the students were saying when they were up here and the importance that they place on talking about race and having access to texts like STAMP is because in our school system it's full of kids just like them who want to hear about the complexities of history and dig into those topics and understand stories of the past. And we've heard about the Japanese internment a number of times here, and our kids can speak to that from a very young age in this district. And then I just want to note that we've also had a chance to really learn more about the Indopino community through Honor Thy Mother. And Gina's up here in the front row. And she just aired the documentary last week for 8th grade students and spoke to them. And those personal stories, like the examples of the Matsudairas and Frank Kinomoto sharing their personal stories, the same is still happening right now in our community, both with Japanese ancestors of our, that have been here, and then also our Indopino community, and that sense of place. And knowing that the history of this place, the people are still here and telling stories that our kids can relate to has been very powerful. So I just want to thank those of you that have come back to schools that have harmed your families, frankly, and you're telling your story in those spaces. So thank you.
I'll give one other little example. So in my career life, I work in terms of changing systems for families who are experiencing homelessness. And I'm always struck at how people don't seem to have a context. It's very easy to think in terms of like, oh gosh, what do those people do wrong that they struggling with homelessness, or like what whatever. And it's just so interesting that people not paying attention, not normalizing conversations about race, don't realize, and they seem surprised when I say, 90% of the people we're helping are BIPOC, and about 90% of those are headed by households headed by women. And we have designed systems in this society over time, whether it was our policy over land ownership, or how the economics of our society work, or how we push people out, that, it came up earlier this evening in terms when the students, younger people than me, I don't want to say young people, but the younger people than me were up here, talking about how, we built an economy on the backs of all kinds of people who were uncompensated for their labor. And there's just generational trauma and inequity that has just compounded, right, for hundreds of years. And it is not by some random accident that 90% of the families we're serving are BIPOC, who are families facing homelessness. Guess what? We've created that system. And I probably talked more than I should now, but I would just say that, okay. But to that idea about what happens when we don't normalize the conversation about race is then people get to pretend that somebody did something wrong to wind up in that position in life.
You mean they're not born oppressed?
Yeah,
get
exactly.
oppressed? Just checking.
And so this, and I'm just stunned and feel like at the core of our work, like when someone's like, well, gee, what leads to family homelessness? What causes that? I'm like, well, racism, and I could just start, right, exactly. I mean, it's land policy, housing policy, home ownership, redlining, it's all there. And you can map this stuff way back very, very clearly. So if we don't talk about it, then we whitewash history and we pretend it doesn't exist.
I think we're sort of.
Oh, y'all were so good that y'all need to bounce out. You did so good. You took all the words. Go ahead. We wanted to honor our elders at this time, and they are our last to speak. So if I have the elders come on up, please. I would like to introduce you to Elder Gina Corpaz, leader in community, if you know about the Indopino community here on the island, and also producer of Honor Thy Mother film and heritage. Gina was also a teacher at Bainbridge High School who coordinated the group that was a multicultural group in UBC for many, many, many years. The Indian Ed coordinator now is Christina Piatto, and I just want to make sure we understand that that program is still going because of the history, because of people like Gina Corpaz, who really spearheaded keeping an affinity group that was continuing to keep families together and community and youth together. Partnered with many Japanese families. We don't have a Japanese elder here tonight, but I just want to put that out there, that Frank Kitamoto and his work in human rights is really the founding of why MAC stayed here, and many of those Japanese brothers, rest in peace, Nakata, who we just not too long ago lost. And then also our African American historian, Akuye Vargas, or Karen Vargas, who has single-handedly spearheaded living life leadership and cultural heritage for African Americans throughout the Kitsap region, but really on Bainbridge Island. And if you are part of Bainbridge Black or you're part of any brownness on the island, you have either heard about the history or held the history because it's in her hands. It's in her small shed. She's the carrier of that until she gets a cultural heritage museum for African Americans. So if you're a philanthropist, go ahead, fill the call. And one of the people who I would call as a mentor and who I love, who is still fighting the fight here in other countries and everywhere, and her organization with youth who are around here, and also the reason why Kitsap Black Student Union was also started in the last year. And Peggy Erickson, white ally, who has taught about white fragility when that was really popular, remember? And then as it shifted, because we didn't want white people to be fragile anymore, we wanted you to be tougher, and so we don't use that anymore, we use white violence. Some of you don't get triggered, stay with me, because you're not really white, you're all peach. I could be getting in trouble. Peggy's the leader of BIU Race and the Race Equity Advisory Council. And just to note that the Race Equity Advisory Council, REN, was really started because of a bunch of us followers and Akuye Vargas, who went to the City Hall and said some choice words. Like, I think I said a few words that, I won't talk about that. But we're one of the few places in the state that have a Race Equity Advisory committee, and although we don't know necessarily what to do with that yet, because having an equity protocol is new, people like Rennie Bispham, Deanna Martinez, people like Carissa, people like Savannah, people like Olivia, they're stepping into calling for us to have a lens on equity all the time, because we're normalizing it and embedding it so it's not an extra special DEI group, we're normalizing it in our regular conversations. So I really want you to understand that that's really what normalizing looks like. It looks like not a special group. We have a special committee meeting on black people today. That's very nice. Said all the white people. What it feels like to have a city or any kind of topic on black people, and there's like 2 black people in leadership, and Brenda, bless our councilwoman Brenda for all her leadership. But y'all see whenever those topics come up, whenever anything black comes up, anything kind of black comes up, everyone's like, where's the black ladies? But the ramifications and the trauma that comes when they leave those meetings carries on. The trauma that happens when we talk about those things and we leave carries on. And our pioneers and elders understand that. So while it may be a topic you can disassociate from tonight, people are living that topic every day. We are excited that you are here. And when we talk about tapping into the history, right now you see a sense of urgency in talking about race, but what do you want to see going forward? I'm sorry that's a heavy, you can change it, you're an elder.
What's the question?
Whatever you want us to be.
Whatever you want. Elders, do you ever feel not listened to? I'll start with Peggy. That will get at Gina and sorry, because you're not fragile.
So I think the question is, what do you want to see going forward? I think the students tonight talked about the fact that they hadn't learned true history coming up to this place. And then they came into reading Stamped and they realized there was a whole history they didn't know about. And when we look around at what is happening today, everything is resting on history. And you were saying earlier.
The unicorn.
Yes, you know, like if you don't understand redlining and the whole history of wealth inequity built through a lot of racism, what's going on today looks like there's something wrong with them because they're poor, you know, because they don't, and that narrative goes on, and it seems somehow rational if you don't know history.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
When we talk about racism, we have to talk about ourselves. And we have to talk about our history. I have to know who I am, where I came from, where my ancestors came from. I come from a stolen people brought to a stolen land. I have to start from there. And from what my ancestors and all of my family members and my community experienced being brought to these American shores. And if I can't understand who I am, where I came from, how I got here, our lived experience, you know, all that we went through, then we become enslaved and in bondage again, even to our own history of who we are. We have no voices. We weren't allowed to read or write. We weren't allowed to even have our own names. We were property. And if we don't want to deal with that history, it causes much harm. Because history is what we have lived here. Yesterday, what we experienced yesterday is now history. Good, bad, and the ugly. But if we erase it as if it never happened, we cause harm and we continue to perpetuate that harm. We're never allowed to step into a place of healing and reconciliation. And I think when we talk about how we move forward and how do we have these conversations about race, we must start with truth. And we must start with what we have all experienced on both sides. It's not just about a white and black thing. It's not just about an indigenous thing. It's about how we have treated each other as human beings in this nation. And we do have to heal that. We have to heal the land, and we have to heal the history. We must do these things if we are to be whole. And for us to not even want to teach that history is an atrocity. It continues to perpetuate the harm. Because we know what true history is. Whether we allow people to research it, to read it, we know that as human beings. We know what we have all experienced. And we know what we have lived through. Yes, we received our freedoms, but there were much forms of oppressions that continued. Healing was not a part of the system. And we continue to build systems and institutionalized racism in our nation. We built it in our laws. We built it in our governments. We built it in our schools. You know, the 60s wasn't that long ago, y'all. You know, some of our children think, oh, that was hundreds of years ago. Yeah, because they don't have a concept of what the history was for their own parents. And how the nation and the country was so divided. And if we're not going to teach the truth and teach true history, our children will suffer for it. Because they are the future. And we want to continue to be able to move our young people in a place where they can heal some of their history. And I think that's where we go as we move forward.
So when I first started constructing my indigenous identity, as many of you know, I grew up as a Filipino. We all identified as Filipinos. And so I took from Rigoberto Menchú that if you're going to be indigenous, live with your people. So one of the first things that I learned was that the work is not 9 to 5. That's your job. Your work is whatever your highest priority is. And so my priority always is, number one on my list, is to reduce prejudice and discrimination. And so that kind of guides me through my day. And it's not work, it's not my job. I don't expect to be paid. But I find lots of allies out there, like probably everybody in this audience, that you're doing the same work and nobody's getting paid, even though it'd be nice to be paid.
She does have a 501, you can donate. I just want to put that out there, that's available to you.
The downside is you never get a pension. But it's the work that our ancestors did. And so when we do the work, we call our ancestors down to come do the work with us, and because we're never alone. Thank you.
Oh, you want a photo?
We want a photo.
Okay.
Elise wants a photo.
Third copy. In flexing the, if you got more than 5 copies, you're gonna go find someone to give it.
He's gotta give it away.
Oh, you really are taking photos
I'm
right now?
totally taking a photo. This is a beautiful photo. Thank you.
Y'all,
Ready?
wait.
You do it for the gram.
For the gram.
Oh my goodness.
Yep, here we go. Ready?
What is that voice?
Do it fast.
This is
1,
what
2,
the gram.
3, cheese.
Both on Instagram. Thank you so much.
Okay.
I want her as much as so bad.
So much. We're so grateful for our elders, and
We have to have conversation.
there just aren't enough thank yous for the work that you do continually and continuing to do. And Gina in the school, Akuye everywhere. But I want you to note that Honor Thy Mother is available. You can actually purchase that movie. And if you're showing it at one of your institutions, you should, if you haven't done that, or your interfaith or your school, it is available to you. If you know that Akuye also puts on the MLK Community Celebration that's at BEMA, and also Black History Month, and a special event. I don't know if I'm supposed to talk about that, but I won't.
No, you can.
What's her name? Pat, what's her name?
Patronal right?
Pat Wright.
Sing out?
Yeah.
The late
Say it loud.
Yes. Patronal right.
Yeah.
She came here.
She was
She worked tirelessly in our community for over 15 years with community sing-outs, bringing our community together, singing together, breaking bread together, fellowshipping across lines, and being able to come together and really break down barriers and really build community across racial lines and talk about some tough stuff. You know, Pat was rough. She would give it to you, and she would do it in love as well. And so we lost Pat, and we want to honor her and commemorate her with the last sing out here on the island. That's going to be the same day. She's always done it every year in January. She was born on Martin Luther King's birthday, but she always dedicated time to come to our community on Bainbridge Island to do sing out. And so we want to honor that work and that labor of race equity and inclusion in our community. It's an honor that she gave of herself and her time And we want to honor her as well, her life and legacy here on Bainbridge Island.
Yes. I'm going to invite our Laura and Jana to come up, our organizers, and thank our beautiful elders as they head out of the seats.
I want to announce, save the date for our next event is December 5th, Monday, December 5th at the library. And today, our community members modeled for you conversations about race. And so we are going to practice that ourselves at the library on December 5th. And 6:30 to 8 p.m. And we will use a guided model called Living Room Conversations, and where you speak from your personal experience and you listen to others' personal experience.
Oh, and is Gigi still here?
Yeah, I think so, in the back.
There she is. Isn't she amazing? I just want to say, let's, yeah. She's got anything she'd like to share.
Yeah, hi everyone. I have a buffet item for all of you guys on Saturday.
But there's no food.
There's no actual food. At the Bainbridge Island Art Museum from 5:30 to 7 p.m. this Saturday, Chasity is hosting a panel discussion with a doctor and researcher from Partners in Health and 2 professors of public health on intersectionality in public health. So very relevant to our conversation today. It's a fundraiser for a medical school in Rwanda, which is pretty exciting stuff. And so if you'd like to come and learn or support our chapter, support our mission, or just support the medical school, you're welcome to do so. I just want to start passing out some flyers. Max and Connor are going to pass out some flyers. If you'd like to come, you do need to register because seats are filling up quick. Our island seems to be pretty excited about this event. Maybe do like 1 per row.
Thank you, Gigi. You heard it here first. I want to say thanks again on behalf of the city to Korean Parent Vargas, Janet Corpus, Kamika Nishida, and our REACT members, and our city council members, Brenda Fentor Jensen, Clarence Marwaki, and Mayor Joe Deep. And thank you again to Kristen Haslett and Mark Emerson for coming out from the school district. Thanks again everyone for coming out. I really appreciate the turnout tonight. And thanks for coming and talking about race, our history, and most importantly, our experience. And I do want to plug again that the book is available for sale here at Eagle Harbor. Yeah.